Alright, hopefully this is going to be a short one as far as the instructions concerned. So today we're going to get into the weeds, as some of us like to say, about something in skateboarding that I feel like is going to make you a much better skater. Before I start getting into it, I want to first talk about Collage skateboards. It's my brand. This corduroy hat is something that we offer. We've also got a lot of decks, my pro model deck, really cool graphics that we came out with recently, the Fortune and Spades graphic, which we made a video for that I'll link in the description. Please check out Collage. Now let's get into this thing that I think is really going to help your skateboarding out, and that is going to Fakie. So for a lot of you guys in the beginning, I can remember this really helping me out, and I didn't do this because of someone's recommendation, because I didn't have anyone to give me recommendations. Nobody was really willing to do that in the 90s when I started skating, so I did everything by trial and error. Now me, when I came into skating, I was already an athlete. You know, I didn't play team sports per se. I played a little bit of basketball, never joined a team or anything like that, but I was like, you know, the crazy kid that was backflipping off stuff and front flipping and back flipping over people and just doing stupid stuff like that. So I was able to intuitively figure my way through most of the beginning of skateboarding, and one of the biggest things that helped me was starting to go to Fakie. Like when the first thing that I ever took to Fakie was a slappy nose slide, right? So I wore the slappy nose slide out. We had red curbs. I live in Southern California, and we had all those red curbs, and I had wax, and I would wax the crap out of the curbs, and at a certain point I was slappy nose sliding 10, 15 feet, like super long, just squatted down there. And then at some point it occurred to me to try to take it to Fakie. So I started to do my slappy nose slides and then add in doing my slappy nose slides to Fakie. And that was about the same time that I started doing front 180s and actually being able to roll away from them Fakie. So it was kind of like two concurrent lessons that were happening at the same time that I was learning to do front 180s and actually roll away, because I could get them to turn before, but I would just stop basically because I wasn't fully turned. But at the same time that I'm doing that, I'm taking the slappy nose slides to Fakie, and that really helped. And then at some point I got like a PVC pipe and cut it on the bottom, and then made a flat bar out of like wood and PVC pipe. It had nails sticking out of it, but we didn't care. Me and my friend Brendan would skate that because that was like the closest thing to having a flat bar that we had, you know. And we're board sliding it, and after a while I got the courage to take that to Fakie. And the same thing happened with my front boards. Learned to front board. I think I did front board the first times like just barely at the end of that that flat bar that we had built, but it was like barely higher than a parking block, you know, about this high. And then I didn't start really being able to slide the front board until we took the flat bar thing and put it down a curb, and then because gravity's helping me, I could actually slide and didn't have to be timid. And that's also where I first did the front board to Fakie. And I learned in the process of that about your shoulders, and how when I was doing the front board, it was actually easier for me to come out to Fakie because my shoulders, I was turning my shoulders. So I was basically doing a 90-degree ollie into it. And I wasn't, like now, when I do my front board, I keep my shoulders straight actually, and I'm looking forward, and my legs and my lower body are all that's turning, so that when I'm sliding, my shoulders are parallel with the rail or whatever I'm front boarding, and then when I get to the end, I don't have to work to turn out. But I didn't know that back then, so I was fully turning into it. And so it happened when I finally started going to Fakie, I realized how much easier it was, and then I realized why it was so much easier, and that led to me learning about turning my shoulders, and how when I learned to backflip, someone gave me a tip that you gotta throw your head and your shoulders over first to get to flip. And then after I learned how to do a back handspring, and I taught myself how to do these, then I learned how to do like a round off backflip, and then I taught myself how to do it with a twist, and I had to start the twist in my shoulders because you start trying to twist your hips and it doesn't really work. But I hadn't connected the dots between that type of movement and the movements in skateboarding, and the front board to fakie was the first thing that made me realize, like, oh, skateboarding is the same way. It's my ability to turn is reliant on me first turning my shoulders and perhaps my head and my shoulders to keep it from feeling alien so that I can see where I'm going. And that's when I put a lot of things together. So after that, I was able to learn how to backside flip, basically. I think I learned varial flips first, but when it came time to learn the backside flip, it wasn't that bad because I realized, like, okay, now I want my whole body to turn, so I have to lead with my shoulders, and that made other things easier. And then at another point, I started doing 5-0s, right? And first I would do just a straight 5-0, and then eventually I wanted to turn to fakie, right? So I started out doing a straight up 5-0 where my front truck's completely over the ledge. And then I ended up doing what we would call like a pivot or a 5-0 pivot, which now people like to call them Susky grinds. That was never really a thing until like around 2003 when This Is Skateboarding came out. That's the first time I ever heard anyone refer to that as Suskies. It's basically just a 5-0 grind. It's just you do it differently depending on what you're on. And I realized that to 180 out of the 5-0, it was easier to do that, what you would call a Susky grind, which actually Susky grinds were only called that backside when they started to be a thing, because he did them backside. That's the other thing about that. Like before that, we always called a 5-0 that was crooked like that a pivot, you know, because you were pivoted, kind of like you would do a pivot on a quarter pipe, which I don't really hear people refer to them as pivots on quarter pipes anymore either, although I don't really hang out with young people that are skating transition ever. If I'm skating any type of transition, it's tiny and it's with an old guy, so I'm not sure what kids are calling things today. But I learned that pivot was an easier way to get out of the 5-0 if I wanted to turn to fakie, and I realized that if I really wanted to make it easy, I could slightly turn my shoulders as well as my legs on the way up to the pivot so that I grind a little bit and just continue to rotate my shoulders, and it makes the 5-0 to fakie very easy. And what that did is it made it so that I started to understand the motion of getting into a frontside tail slide. So where I'm going with this is that you guys gotta start going to fakie. If you're a beginner, if you can ollie, if you can slappy nose slide, if you can do those things, start doing your tricks to fakie. And I think what I did, starting with the slappy nose slide and then taking your slappy nose slide to fakie, and then finally learning how to board slide, and then turning your board slide and then your to fakie, and then your front board to fakie, and then, you know, I also did front 50 frontside 180, which is why when I started the front 5-0 to fakie, I would do the normal straight up 5-0, because I was basically just doing the same thing that I do to frontside 180 out of a 50-50, turning at the last minute. But then when I learned it's a little easier to do the pivot, then that led to me having an easier time getting into a tail slide, because when I started the pivot to fakie, or the 5-0 to fakie where I was crooked on top of it, I would turn my shoulders a little bit on the way up to it, and then I kind of realized, oh, I'm getting into this almost all the way to a tail slide. So then it made it so that I could go to a curb and start rotating harder and more, and then I could eventually start getting into the tail slide. First I would get into the pivot and then land in a tail slide, right? I would go like land in the pivot and then it would drop down to a tail slide, and then eventually it started to get straight into the tail slide, and I could only come out of the tail slides fakie in the beginning because I was creating such rotation with my upper body that I wasn't able to stop it and then go to fakie. Then I realized I want to go to forward too, and I had to learn how much rotation to create on the way up so that I didn't over rotate and have trouble coming back out to forward of the tail slide. And what I'm saying is that it's like a chain reaction that was all caused by me starting to do tricks to fakie. So I'd say start with the slappy nose slide, do that to fakie. Go to the board slide, do that to fakie. Your front board, do that to fakie. Your front side 50-50, do that to fakie. Your back side 50-50, do that to fakie. Front side 5-0 to fakie. Your tail slides, because my front and back tail slides were both to fakie first before I could come out to forward, because it's just much harder to get on, slide, and then turn out. It took more control than it took just to kind of rotate my shoulders, hit it on the way up, and come right off. And I know a lot of people who had the same experience. That wasn't my experience with lip slides necessarily, though. With lip slides, by the time, like, I could already do tail slides to forward before I was able to get myself to have the courage to try any type of lip slide. So I did my lip slides to forward. Same with nose blunts, tricks like that. Those you usually learn on the back end compared to like the 50-50s and the nose and tail slides. Those are like the tricks you're going to learn first. And then like lip slides and nose blunts and blunt slides and stuff like that, you're going to have a certain amount of control already by the time you're doing those. That led me into so many other areas of skateboarding just from going to fakie, starting out of the slappy nose slide. And so I think this is one of those things that will really evolve your skating, and that if you really integrate this into how you're skating already, it's really going to do that quickly, because now you're going to start to understand about moving your body, and we control the skateboard based on how we move our bodies. And the quicker you internalize that, the better you are going to be at understanding more and more difficult tricks. So I'd say start going to fakie, start doing it now. And if you're not able to do like backside and frontside 180s with a full rotation, learn to do that at the same time that you're learning to go to fakie on the ledge, because those are connected as well. Once you start learning how to rotate the full 180, you'll also start to see that you can start your rotation early, for instance on a slappy nose slide, and then you can take that slappy nose slide and keep rotating your shoulders while you're sliding a little bit, so that coming out is even easier. The other thing I didn't touch on is crooked grinds. I didn't learn to crooked grind and come out to forward. I learned how to crooked grind and come out to fakie. It was the only way I could come out of the crooked grind, because popping out at the end just wouldn't work for me. So if it wasn't for me already knowing how to slappy nose slide, and by that time regular nose slide, where I'm ollieing into it to fakie, I'd have had a much harder time with the crooked grind. My first crooked grinds were all to fakie. I think front crooks were not like that, because those were just bonks at the end until I was comfortable enough to get in, to lock in. But once I was comfortable enough to lock in with front crooks too, they were all to fakie in the beginning. I couldn't pop out to forward. So that's all that I've got. I really think that'll help. Another thing, if you get a lot of use out of this and you feel like you'd like more targeted one-on-one tips from me, go over to the Patreon and you can do that there. I have quite a few people that I'm critiquing their tricks. I'm sending them long voice messages after I've watched and analyzed the video of theirs. They're sending me videos and I'm breaking down the videos, taking screenshots of where I see they need some improvement, sending them a screenshot of a trick of mine, and we compare where we are at different points of the tricks. And it's really helped people, specifically with those kickflips and getting that third version of kickflip where it's like you ollie and then you flick out at the end. I've helped like 3 different people over the past few months go from the second area of the kickflip to this one. But there's tons of other things that I can help you with if you're interested in that. You can also hit boardcontrolacademy.com if you want to book lessons with me and you're not interested in doing something like Patreon. But over on Patreon, you do get to take part in the Q&As. I just recorded one today. I'll be uploading it this evening. It's Halloween. Happy Halloween to any of you guys that are into that. Peace.